folks, and thanks for joining me for the first part of my little Inversions in Detail series. Today we're going to be going over shoulder stand, and as we move through the rest of the series I'll work on headstand, handstand and forearm balance. So really we could say the four inverted postures or in primary inversions in the yoga practice. As always, thank you for allowing me to share these practices with you. If you have any questions, please let me know, pop them in the comments and I'll be happy to help you in any way I can. If you'd like to support me, there's a PayPal link in the description, but if not, I just want to be able to share these practices with you and make sure they're accessible to everyone. So, without further ado, moving on to inversions generally and shoulder stand. One little thing I guess that's worth mentioning with shoulder stand and all inversions is that they're beneficial firstly in terms of helping us to overcome some of our psychological restrictions. Secondly, if done attentively and intelligently, they're a great way to help regulate our blood pressure. Often the inverted postures help to stimulate the baroreceptors, the little pressure sensors in our blood vessels that allow them to open and close in response to changing demands of blood pressure. So they're often very helpful for those who have high or low blood pressure, helping to self-regulate as long as they're done intelligently. As with any yoga practice, if something doesn't feel good, don't do it. Never force your body into positions that don't feel comfortable. If you start to feel stressed or anxious or in any other way uncomfortable, come out of the practice or out of the posture, go back to a simpler variation or just skip it altogether for now. So bear that in mind. With shoulder stand, it's generally accessible for everyone, particularly in simple form, and I will be going through sort of from a simple stage through to more complex and some releasing postures as well. So just go to where you feel comfortable, and again remember it might take you some weeks, months or years to be able to get towards the full variations of the postures, and that really doesn't matter as long as you're doing the best you can at any given point in time. That is yoga. So don't worry about the fancy pictures, the final postures, just do what feels right for you. So I guess the first thing we need to bear in mind is with shoulder stand, we're going to be getting a little stretch for the back of the neck, and we want that to be symmetrical. So if you have long hair and it's tied behind your head, make sure you undo it. So if you're in a ponytail or anything like that, take your hair out before you go into shoulder stand. We're going to start lying down on our backs. You just want to be comfortably on your mat. And the first thing we're going to do with our shoulder stand is just come into a little half shoulder stand preparation. So all we're going to do is push into the elbows, and we're going to bring the knees up to the chest, and with a little bit of momentum, a little push, we're going to lift the hips up and place the hands under the hips. So it's a little rock, a little push, and hands under the hips. And you should be able to see here that my neck is still fairly much in line with my upper back. The hands are taking a bit of weight, but we're not trying to straighten the legs. We're just getting a sense of having the hips up higher than the head. So already this is starting to help with venous return and lymphatic drainage because the hips are higher than the heart. And actually it's enough to stay here. But if you feel comfortable, we're going to start to straighten the legs. Now notice I'm not trying to straighten up, I'm keeping my body in more or less the same position it was just in, but all I've done is straighten the legs out. And that might be enough, but here's where we need to start paying attention to our body. For some people, having the lower back a little bit rounded feels more comfortable, but for others, it'll feel a bit more comfortable to bring the lower back into a little bit of an arch. So you can experiment with both of those and see which feels better for your body. And it might change from day to day or week to week, but just be prepared to experiment with different shapes in the lower spine. So just work with what feels good for you. Now, here there's not really any pressure on the neck. I'm resting on my upper back and there's some weight on the shoulders. But as we start to lift up higher, we're going to start to bring more and more of a stretch to the neck.
So it's really important we keep an awareness of how the neck feels. And it should also feel like we're moving the base of the skull away from the shoulder blade. So the back of the neck is getting stretched out. We're not poking the chin up. If anything, the chin should feel like it's pulling in towards the throat. So we're making the Jalandhara Bandha position. So from here, we start to lift just a little bit higher to begin with. So the hands start to move up the spine, the hips lift a little bit more. And what we're trying to do is position the legs so we don't have a lot of weight on the hands, and most of the weight is going down through the shoulders. So you can experiment with moving the hips and the legs a little bit to find the point where you feel it's relatively comfortable. Shoulder stand is often the start of the meditative part of the practice, so it shouldn't be really strenuous. It should be a posture that you can hold certainly for several minutes, and ideally up to 10 minutes. So from here I can still just lift my head off the mat, so there's no pressure on the neck. But as I go higher, what we need to do is take the pressure away from the neck and onto the shoulders. So once we lift past this point, what we're trying to do is bring the shoulder blades closer together so that the weight of the body is still supported primarily by the shoulders. It is called shoulder stand, not neck stand. So as I start to lift up a little bit higher, I'm going to wriggle one shoulder blade under, and I'm going to rock to the other side and wriggle the other shoulder blade under. And I'm just going to take the legs a little bit higher and check in with how that feels in the neck. So now I can't lift my head off the floor, but I've still got the weight on the shoulders, and I'm still quite comfortable here. So again, positioning the legs so that you feel relatively balanced. Then from there, we can lift a little bit higher. Again, shoulder blades tuck even further under. And if you feel okay, you're trying to make a relatively straight line all the way through the body. It won't be completely straight for most people, but you're trying to get as straight as you can. Now, some people talk about really tensing and reaching out through the feet here. I think that helps to get you into position, but once you're in your position, see how much you can relax your legs, because one of the benefits of the inverted postures is, as I mentioned, lymphatic drainage and improved venous return. And if we tense the muscles of the legs, that doesn't happen. So we want to try and stay as relaxed as we can without losing the posture. And if you do that right, it'll feel like the legs are sort of floating up out of the hips. Now there's all sorts of fancy variations we can take from here. We can do sort of splits type positions. I'm just going to do simple variations for now. We can do Pt.1, we can do Garudasana. There's all sorts of little variations that you can take from shoulder stand. There's arm variations we can take as well. Sorry, it's a little hard to talk in this position. There are arm variations we can take as well. But again, I just want to keep it simple for now, just working with more or less full shoulder stand in its traditional form. And we spend a little bit of time here nice and relaxed. And when we want to come down out of the posture, again, we start just by lowering the hips a little bit and freeing the shoulder blades. And again, here's where you might want to experiment with arching the back a little bit or keeping it rounded. Do what feels right for you. And then we slowly start to bring the legs over the head towards the Halasana position or plow posture. Now, if you're tight in the legs or the lower back, you'll find that you can't get your feet anywhere near the floor with the legs straight. That's absolutely fine. We're really looking at this as a way to release out of shoulder stand, not really looking for a hamstring stretch. So if you need to bend your knees a little bit, that's absolutely fine. And what we're trying to find is a position where we're balanced on the shoulders. So I should be able to take my hands away and my feet are not on the floor and just balance on the shoulders and upper back. So again, the neck here isn't really taking the load. There's maybe still a gentle stretch, but there's no pressure through the neck. As I feel a bit more comfortable, I might be able to take the feet a little bit further towards the floor, and maybe I can straighten the legs, but that's not important. Now there's two different hand positions you can take in Halasana. One has the hands behind the back, either pressing down or interlaced. The other one has the hands next to the feet. Now, I don't think there's a right or wrong here. They both feel really different for the shoulders and neck. So you might like to see which one feels better for you, or you might just like to alternate between them. And we spend a few breaths in Halasana, just letting the shoulders and the back of the neck relax after the shoulder stand. And then when we want to come down, if we've got the hands behind the back, we just free the hands so they're not interlaced and press them gently into the floor. If we've got the hands next to the feet, we've got the option to bring the hands to the calves or heels. And either option, we're trying to use the hands to control the movement so that when we come back down out of Halasana, we're not just collapsing, but rather we're rolling down, and we're trying to isolate each vertebra as we roll down. So using the hands either on the feet or calves or behind the back to really gently roll down through the whole spine. And I like to pause whenever I feel there's a bit of tension, and just see if you can let the muscles around the spine relax a little bit. Sometimes you'll get nice little releases for the upper spine. So we slowly roll all the way down, trying to feel each vertebra moving in sequence. The head stays on the mat the whole time. And once the hips reach the mat, I like to bend the knees and just rest for a few breaths with the body relaxed. So again, not moving the head at this point. Now from here we take traditionally Matsyasana, the fish posture. Full Matsyasana, most people cannot access, and even those who can, generally you really need two people to come into the full variation of the posture. Matsyasana is meant to just be a stretch for the throat after it's been in that compressed position in shoulder stand. So the simplest option we can take for Matsyasana is just to place the hands over the knees and simply try to arch the lower back off the mat. So here you can see I can actually slide a hand under my lower back. The back's not flat. There's actually a little arch. And that might be your version of Matsyasana, and that's fine. If you want to go a little bit further, we stretch the legs out and place the hands just under the top of the thighs. Again, this is an accessible variation for everyone. Then we're going to push down into the elbows. The hands are under the back of the thighs. We push into the elbows, lift the chest, lift the chin, and then we just rest the head on the mat. Now there are, again, fancier variations I can perhaps talk about in future. But here we've just got a stretch for the throat and the front of the chest, a counter posture from shoulder stand, but the weight is still primarily in the elbows. And we're trying to look back if we can. And after we spend a few breaths there, we just gently release the neck and lie flat once more. Now for some people that's enough and they'll just rest there. But I like to do a little neck strengthening and releasing afterwards as well. So from there, I would gently bring the hands to interlace around the shins. So we're not trying to hug the legs all the way in, the body's just staying fairly flat or spine fairly flat. And then with the chin to the throat, we just lift the head 5 to 10 centimeters off the mat. Then as we breathe in, we turn to the right, nice and smoothly. And breathing out, we turn to the left. And then we breathe into the right and out to the left. And then breathe in halfway to the right. And then take the head back to the mat and have a rest. And then we repeat that on the other side. So chin to throat, head maybe 10 centimeters off the mat. And this time we inhale to the left, nice and smoothly. And then exhale all the way to the right. And then inhale smoothly to the left, chin stays into the throat, neck in line with the upper spine. And we exhale all the way to the right. And then we inhale to the left halfway. And take the head back to the mat. And then with your head on the mat, just gently roll it side to side. Just see if you can release any last bits of tension from the neck. And from there we can stretch out into Shavasana if we're taking that. But that's the end of this little in-depth inversion focus. We can just come back to sitting. And ideally the neck and the shoulders will feel nice and free. You can give your shoulders a little roll. They should feel quite relaxed and open. And the neck should be free to move as well. So that's a little in-depth into shoulder stand, Sarvangasana. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, let me know. And otherwise, thank you for joining me. And I hope to see you for the other 3 parts of this little Inversions in-depth series. Thanks very much. I'll see you soon.